Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the 8-Bit Adventures podcast. Here to bring you the latest and greatest gaming news of the past week. This is episode 313, and I am your host, Sean Hayes. Can't remember. Did we? I don't think we did not do a show last week. It was my anniversary. It was me and my wife's anniversary. So we didn't do a show last week. But we're back here this week. We do have some it's mostly small news topics. There wasn't a lot of big shakeups or whatever, with the exception of if you play Magic the Gathering, in particular the Commander format. Huge shakeup. So we'll talk about that a little bit. The rest of the stuff kind of small. It was a bit of a light news week. Mostly the stuff that's been circulating has been related to like Switch 2 rumors, which I don't pay attention to. I don't do speculation. Like I don't report on speculation. And I would much rather wait for official sources. So, but then, there was also, I guess, Jason Schreier of Bloomberg put out a book talking about Blizzard, actually, and kind of this trajectory that they've been on and different projects that have fallen by the wayside and everything. So that some interesting tidbits, but not a whole lot to throw into the news. The big takeaway from that was like there was supposed to have been a whole bunch of like Netflix series to be put in development. And then I guess Netflix poached their CFO and Blizzard basically nuked that relationship. So like I guess the intent was to get like an Overwatch series, a StarCraft series, and something else. It wasn't Diablo, but nothing on the Warcraft front though with that. And then lately I've just been playing War Within, latest expansion for World of Warcraft. I talked about it a couple episodes ago. In particular, like a lot of improvements made for solo players, including like the delve system, which are just basically micro dungeons that can be done solo, or you can do it with a group. That I think is the best system that they've put into the game. I think it's great, and it's actually getting me to do some sort of dungeon related content, as well as follower dungeons and then story mode. I was disappointed with story mode for the raid. I thought it was going to be that you actually do the raid, sort of like a follower dungeon, but it turns out it just skips the raid and brings you to the relevant boss fight. So at least you get to do the boss fight. But, like, I thought it would have been cool to do the raid. Even if you don't get loot, it would have been a nice way to practice the raid mechanics. So delves, big plus. Follower dungeons, big plus. Story mode for raids, big minus. They missed the mark on that one. So, but how about we get into this week's news topics, starting with some Dungeons and Dragons news. So first up, IGN reports that WizKids, who is like an official partner, has opened pre-orders for official Baldur's Gate mini or Baldur's Gate 3 minis, as part of a set. It includes Astarion, Gale, Karlach, Lae'zel, Shadowheart, Wyll, and Withers. Withers is a bit of an odd inclusion, but sure. I would have put at doing like the companions, or maybe instead of wizard or instead of Withers, putting like the default dirge in there. And then doing like a companion set where you can have like Withers, Jaheira, Minsk, Minthara, Halsin, Scratch, the Owlbear. But that's just my opinion. The set is being sold so pre-orders are open. The set is $49.99 US. Which considering these are pre-painted, WizKids minis are usually pretty decent quality. That's like, $7 a mini. So it's not too bad. If you're a person that likes getting sort of the 3D, like a traditional mini. I prefer a little more bang for my buck these days and go for like standees and papercraft stuff, mostly because it is several orders of magnitude cheaper. But if you want to include the Baldur's Gate 3 characters in your home game, or just have a mini, just throw your friends for a loop and put one of these guys on the table in place of your mini. There you go. I will say, the last time I pre-ordered something from WizKids, it took a long time for it to come in. So hopefully the production window for this is a lot smaller than what I went through. I got the Ukatoa, like I pre-ordered the Ukatoa mini and the Elder Brain Dragon mini, and the Ukatoa mini was like 2 years. I'm not joking. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this again. So hopefully your experiences are different. Next up, IGN reports that in light of the devastation wrought by Hurricane, is it Helena? I think. In the southeastern U.S., which, it's bad. For those who are not aware of what's going on, major flooding, a lot of really, really bad situations going on in the Carolinas. But in light of that, Square Enix has decided to halt sort of the automatic demolition of housing in Final Fantasy XIV for specific shards. It seems like it's mostly US related shards. So to kind of give some context on this. So in Final Fantasy XIV, player housing is a big deal. Player housing is like an end game type of activity. It's expensive. Player housing is limited, so like when new housing comes in, there's a feeding frenzy for it. And when I say new housing comes in, it means that someone's house was demolished, in that basically they clear out all the player data and stuff, and then re-released to the market. So this happens if you don't log in for, like, it's typically for 45 days, I think. So because obviously of the amount of damage that was done by the hurricane. There's a lot of folks who are in bad places right now who logging into Final Fantasy XIV is the last thing on their minds. So Square Enix was like, we're not going to punish people for a natural disaster by losing something that takes a considerable amount of time and resources to acquire in this game. You know, like we don't want to punish them for not being able to log in for a month if they're worried about getting access to food and water. So yeah, this is I wanted to provide that context because there were a lot of folks who saw the headline and immediately assumed like, oh, it's just some woke thinking that, you know, Square Enix was just doing a sensitivity thing of like housing being demolished or something. No, it's not that. They're just being considerate of people who, you know, whose houses may have been actually destroyed in real life. So, for people who can't be bothered to read articles and put their brain cells together to think about it, get a life. Go touch grass. So I'm fired up because of there's a bunch of stuff, and I'm tired of communities just being awful. And we'll get into that later with the magic stuff. So yeah, good on Square Enix. So again, only for specific shards. So I don't have the list, unfortunately, but I think it's generally assumed if it's a US shard, that it's safe. And here's the thing: if you're logging in every day, this doesn't affect you. So these are mostly for players who, you know, have been inactive for a little while. But if you're a regular player who logs in every day and you have housing, like, you don't have to worry about this. So yeah. Next up, not really a piece of news, but just a fun little tidbit. So IGN reports that Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is the first what's considered a mainline game of the series, not to credit Shigeru Miyamoto. So this is... It's a bit of an odd duck because it was co-developed by Nintendo and Grezzo, which I think was also the case with Link's Awakening. But this is considered, you know, a mainline Zelda. It's just not in the sort of sweeping open world sort of experience that, you know, things since Ocarina of Time have been. It's more of the traditional sort of top-down puzzle type game. But yeah, there's been a couple side games, like Hyrule Warriors, the CDI games, although we don't like to talk about those. And I think Cadence of Hyrule, in which, like, they didn't really credit Miyamoto. And I think the original Hyrule Warriors gave like a special thanks, but like otherwise didn't have a credit. So, you know, this is just an interesting tidbit. It may point to, you know, it is known that he has taken more of a step back from game development at Nintendo and is instead more focusing on new brand opportunities, and working as sort of the creative liaison, basically for film and the theme parks. So this is just, you know, time marches on and people retire or get close to it. So, but yeah, that's it. Just a little anecdote. All right, next up, this will probably be the thing that we talk about the most this week. So, Wizards of the Coast announced that following the resignation of the Commander Rules Committee, they will take over management and moderation of the Commander format. Now, if you play Commander and you have been somehow unaware of the news, so last week, the Rules Committee, which was a group of independent sort of players, content creators, and stuff, I believe it was 5 people, who had, who were pretty influential in the Magic scene, would basically get together and make decisions about the Commander format, namely whether cards should be banned or not banned, but also certain guidelines players should follow. They had largely been keeping their eye on things for the past several years, but not really making any big moves. And then last week kind of did a bombshell of banning 4 cards, one of which, Nadu, didn't come as a shock to anybody since Nadu ended up being banned in like pretty much every other Magic format. But then Mana Vault, Dockside Extortionist, and Jeweled Lotus were all banned. These are all considered chase cards, $100 cards. Jeweled Lotus was like the basically poster card for with one of the premier sort of Commander set booster sets that they put out. Dockside Extortionist hadn't been reprinted in a while, which is why it had that price. Mana Vault was just recently included in the last Ixalan set as being like a chase alternate card in the premier or collector boosters. So it's one of the things where like these are cards that were like staples of CDH or competitive Commander, but really kind of like if they're included in a casual Commander game can become a bit oppressive. The problem is because it's a casual format, right, that a competitive scene grew out of, it's a mess. And for a sanctioned events, which for most places is just you show up with your Commander decks and you play and people get packs. There are places that do, CDH tournaments or Commander tournaments, and every time I read about one of those, it's an absolute mess and there's not a great handle on it. So basically it's one of those things where if you include high power cards, in a high powered, if you bring a high powered deck and you just bring high powered decks to like a casual night or a casual format, and you just end up stomping all over everybody, it doesn't feel great for, the other 3 players at the table. And these cards tended to really accelerate that competitiveness in decks. Which also, goes to show why they were $100 cards. But so they all got banned, and then the community lost its mind. Absolutely lost its mind because, and how could they? When I guess the feelings of the rules committee were that, number one, Jeweled Lotus should never have been printed. And that, Dockside and Mana Vault had kind of been a problem of just acceleration. So they banned those. Then basically, because Magic is no longer just a game, but is now an investment opportunity for people who should be spending their time on stocks instead of cardboard, members of the community who are very passionate about it, and this is putting it very diplomatically, decided to, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this. They sent death threats and tried to and doxed the members of the rules committee and sent threats of harm and violence over the banning of cards, instead of doing what everyone else does and just gets over it. Okay? If this is a format where, like, if you're buying it to go play at the store, sure, fine. If you were buying it to play around your kitchen table, you should have just printed proxies instead of spending hundreds of dollars on cardboard. Okay? There was no excuse for sending death threats over this. And basically, in response to that, the rules committee said, cool, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. They don't get paid for it. It was entirely on a volunteer basis. And it was also controversial because there is also like an advisory group where it's another group of volunteers who are basically like sort of a go-between between the community at large and the rules committee. And they were not given a heads up as to this decision. So there's also some drama there. But it was, the rules committee knew that this was going to be a controversial decision because they were popular cards, they were expensive cards. And they figured, let's just rip the Band-Aid off. And we'll deal with the fallout. Instead of giving people a heads up and then having all sorts of weird speculative investment stuff happening. And then, the fallout was far worse because people can't act maturely about cardboard. So they said, yeah, we quit. We're done. Whatever the future of this is, whatever ruling body is going to take over, we don't care. We're done. And so Wizards of the Coast has stepped in to manage it. Now, I think the professor, so Tolarian Community College, put it best, is that Wizards taking it over is what should have happened, but it's also bad. or what needed to happen, but it's also bad. Because Wizards of the Coast, being the body that prints the cards, doesn't really have a vested interest in banning cards. And if it were up to Wizards, they certainly would not have banned Jeweled Lotus, Mana Vault, and Dockside Extortionist. Especially considering that 2 of those cards were just reprinted. Albeit in premier products. So yeah. And I guess how they're going to address things now is they're going to do a bracket system. So officially there's going to be a bracket system where cards will be basically designated as tier 1 through tier 4, with 4 being the highest, like the highest power. And your deck's tier rating is whatever the highest tier of any card in the deck is. So it's not a perfect system. I think the overall concept's fine. I don't think there's enough tiers. But this is like something that, Smogon does for their like Pokemon battling stuff, is that they have different tiers basically. And how that works is you So Pokemon of a certain tier can't be used in lower tiers, but you can always use Pokemon from lower tiers up. So that's to prevent, like if you want to run a team of like garbage Pokemon, not Trubbish, but like garbage, like Sunkerns. If you want to see how a team of like 6 Sunkerns can do, it's to prevent people, it's to make sure that the people that you're battling against are using Pokemon that have similar levels of power instead of somebody then rampaging through with like a Mewtwo. So in this case, because it's 100 cards, or 60 cards, we'll say, if you want to remove the lands, like basic lands or whatever. I think there needs to be a little bit more gradation. But basically, it results then in a Rule Zero conversation. And the goal was to promote how to approach Rule Zero conversations. With the goal to be like, hey, this is a tier 1 deck that happens to include this one card that's tier 4. Are people okay with that? And I would say if your deck is like that extreme of an example, in most cases, people are probably going to be okay with it. But like you should also, I think, be ready to have backups to swap in for that. So yeah. And I have no problem with this. I'm somebody that has Gaia's Cradles, which are, if they're in mint condition or near mint condition, they're $800 cards. Mine are certainly not that because I played them unsleeved for years. But they're still several $100s probably. I still play with them. I have no problem if people are like, hey, yeah, no, that's a little too much power. Can you swap them out? And I just swap them out for basic lands or whatever. I have no problem with that. I would also, here's the thing. Those cards are several $100s. If Wizards turned around tomorrow, or if the Commander Rules Committee had said like, hey, Gaia's Cradle, problematic, let's get rid of it, and they banned it, and then the value tanked, I'd be like, oh no, whatever. Maybe now I can go back to playing unsleeved and people will stop harassing me about it. Yeah, I don't know. It's investing in collectibles for retirement or as a retirement opportunity or to build a nest egg impacts how the actual game is played. And that bothers me. And I wish people would just stick to stocks where you will actually make money. Like instead of sending $100, and this is more for speculation and not for people who are going to buy this stuff to then play with it. Like that's a different case. But for speculation, if you're going to spend $1,000 to buy a bunch of cardboard, that then, that time tomorrow could be worth nothing. Like imagine if you had spent that $1,000 on stocks instead. Like you would get a much better return on your investment. And this is a problem that every TCG has right now, and like a lot of collectibles have right now, is that it's turned into this investment thing. And I think that ultimately harms the actual game aspect to it. So, and this is what happens. Then you get, the body of people who don't have a great track record of bans, or who have routinely shown that they will put out cards that are overpowered and then ban them a month later after they've made all their money on people buying that stuff. Now in charge of the format. So I don't know. I kind of agree that like Wizards should be in charge of it, but it's also bad that they're in charge of it. I think that's a very apt observation and opinion. So so that's what's going on with Commander, folks, and that was the big dust up. And basically the rules committee got chased off of social media for their safety, or they left social media for their safety, but they were chased off from people who care too much about cardboard. So before I get too heated on that topic, let's move on. Because next up, I don't talk about The Sims a lot, but this seemed kind of too weird to not talk about, is Eurogamer reports that The Sims 4, the next update, Life and Death, is a spooky update that will include things like embalming, a Grim Reaper job, reincarnation, ghosts, other stuff involving the afterlife, and more. Yeah, I don't play The Sims. I haven't really. I had my Sims for the Wii, but like, this is getting wild. How much stuff are they gonna put in The Sims? It just feels like this is so out there. That I was like, I gotta talk about it. Yeah. So now, if your Sims pass away, they can just turn into ghosts and then haunt their previous house and do stuff like that. And the Grim Reaper job is like your one of your Sims can have a job where they just go around reaping people that are at death's door. So yeah. Yeah, I don't have any other details, but it's just wild. It's bizarre. They also did something about like ghost romance. So there you go. Because I know there's a subset of folks out there that they like that. So, yeah. So Sims fans, you're continuing to get your wild and weird stuff. So good on you. Finally, this is very exciting news. I'm super excited about this. Polygon reports that a crowdfunding campaign for Valheim the board game is now live. And apparently it hit its goals like day one. It is on Gamefound, not Kickstarter. So Gamefound is it's just like another platform. I've seen there's been a couple other board games that use it. And what's nice is that like it has sort of fulfillment built into it. Because normally like with Kickstarter, you end up having to then like the Kickstarter campaign happens and then it goes to backer kit. But like Gamefound, everything's all in one, it seems like. So yeah, this is a board game. So for those who don't know, Valheim was a popular sort of open world exploration, crafting, survival game. Had really great building mechanics, and had like a very sort of retro, like PS1 art style to it. I guess maybe PS2. PS1's a little, that might be a little harsh. But yeah, had very sort of a lower poly art style, that gave it a sort of interesting look to the game. But essentially, I want to say it's like you're in the lands of the dead. It's like you have died, and you were sent to the lands of the dead, which don't look all that different from the lands of the living. But then there's, trolls and wood spirits and monsters that appear. And your goal is to just survive, and make your way through. So in this, tries to keep elements of that. So there is exploration. There's combat. There's crafting. The way the game works is at the beginning you reveal, like you decide a boss monster that is sort of the goal, or the end goal of the game is to defeat the boss monster. And that boss monster will have like different objectives and stuff. And so the exploration part is to like figure out where it is, and different events that happen. And then combat to combat minions and the boss monster itself and everything. And then crafting to get bonuses. And crafting, you make stuff to put in your house. Now, this is not included in the base version of the game, but you can get it as an add-on, or it's in the collector's edition and up. But it's this really adorable little like cardboard assembled house that you then put standees of your crafted stuff in, and you can arrange it how you like. So you can actually build a little house as part of playing this game. Player boards look gorgeous. I mean, and the art in general looks absolutely gorgeous. So I'm super stoked about this. Gameplay looks great. So yeah, and I'm a big fan of Valheim to start with. So, but it's just the little house is so great. I can't say enough about how cute and charming I think it all looks. So that is live right now. So I know it is a game that is being developed in Europe. So for US citizens, you will be paying a little bit more because the dollar is weak against the euro right now. But and it's also pretty good value for the type of game that it is. So yeah, that is live now on Gamefound. Valheim, the board game. Go check it out. And that is going to wrap everything up for this week. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you all so much. If you'd like to see more content, be sure to head over to 8-bitadventures.com. If you'd like to help support that content, you can check out patreon.com/8bitadventures for our Patreon. Patrons can support for as little as $1 a month, which is like an eighth of what a Twitch sub is. Just saying. But also you can support, by subscribing on Twitch. Use those Prime subs, since that's free. Or just generally engaging with the content. So like, subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, all that good stuff. Big shout out and thank you to all of my patrons. Thank you for your continued support. Opening theme is One Up by Professor Shy Guy. You can find his work over at professorshyguy.bandcamp.com. And with that, we are done for this week. So, as always, have fun, happy gaming, and enjoy your pie cake.